talk about a scientific perspective to some of the new things that are happening. And as we begin this PowerPoint program, I want to duly acknowledge some of the academic researchers that have contributed to the information that I'm going to provide, and that includes Dr. Carl Sagan, Dr. Greg Braden, NASA, Susan Joy Renison, and Alexei Dmitriev, and Dr. Luc Montier. And there are also research teams from Duke University that have added to this university, to this information. Now, many people that are in mainstream academics lose their credibility when they get into metaphysics. And so the conclusions that I will draw from the same information that I duly credit as being amassed from NASA, Renison, Braden, etc., is quite different. So I want to clarify that the conclusions I draw from this information does not represent the conclusions that they draw. And with that, we'll move ahead. And so this is the crediting, and Buddy, if you can get that slide on the film, I want to absolutely make sure that researchers are credited. And so let's talk about the new Earth. Changes have been taking place on the planet Earth for 2 decades, and some of these are glaringly apparent, and some of them are a lot more subtle. The energy around us is shifting. It has been shifting for some time. We've seen the weather, have we not? When I was giving this talk in Arkansas, we had just come off of the hurricane that devastated New England, Hurricane Sandy. And there was some remarkable evidence of a golden mean spiral in the way that moved around. And the point being that it looked like possibly some of this extreme weather that we're having is because the glaciers are melting. The water levels are rising. The temperature of the earth is increasing. Global warming. And that is changing the weather. And unfortunately, less than a week ago, a devastating F4 class tornado flew through Moore, Oklahoma. The tornado was up to 2 miles, over 11,000 feet wide. They suggest that some of the winds exceeded 247 miles per hour, 250 miles per hour. It absolutely devastated gaps of land. And interestingly, it was only a year before that an E or an F5 tornado went through Joplin, Missouri. Does anyone know what the winds of the F5 tornado were? Anyone want to offer that? 311 miles per hour. Incredible things are happening. And so we are aware that the energy is shifting. But what I suggest to you is that so are we. That our environment is affecting us in ways that we may not necessarily recognize. Graham and I have had this conversation. Greg Braden was the first to amass the NASA data to talk about the solar storms. Susan Joy Renison has spoken about the storms with the same information gathered from NASA and from the research of Greg Braden and others. And so it is absolutely my belief, and Graham's and others I've spoken to, that the primary mechanism for the shift of the Earth is the massive pouring of plasma onto the planet. And basically, what are we talking about when we talk about this? We're talking about solar winds, we're talking about solar flares, And we are in solar maximum right now. How many people are aware, by a show of hands, how often the magnetic poles of the sun shift? How often?
Oh, I thought you meant.
Oh.
I feel it.
Someone tell me how often the sun shifts its magnetic poles. That's the Mayan calendar. That's a good number. Every 11 years, the sun shifts its magnetic poles. And we on Earth, so many people talk, there's going to be a pole shift. There's going to be a pole shift because of the ancient prophecy. And so a magnetic pole shift is not necessarily a catastrophic event. A polar axis shift, an axis shift would be, but a magnetic shift would be not. The sun does it every 11 years. And we are in solar maximum in 2013. How many are you aware that we've had a few magnificent, just enormous solar flares within the last 4 weeks? X-class. And so we are in a year that Metatron refers to as year one of the new Earth. And these plasmic shifts, and by plasma I mean subatomic particles. When a solar flare comes in, it is primarily a negative charge. And that is referred to as anionic. And so it changes the magnetic signature of the Earth. And I suggest that it is the solar winds that are the spark of everything that is happening and our change. I suggest that the solar storms that really began increasing after the harmonic convergence, and when was the harmonic convergence? Somebody tell me. 1987. Is that right? 1987? Some of the most enormous solar flares began occurring right after that. 89, all through the 90s and the 2000s, we had year after year of incredible solar storms that just changed the magnetic energy of the Earth with all of this plasma. And so I suggest that this is the spark of everything that is happening, that the Earth's transition of environmental change, of weather change, of tornadoes, of hurricanes, and earthquakes plays a part of this. But also that there is a biological shift that may be occurring with this. And so the new truth bearers, and I suggested to you that there were academics that really cannot get involved in metaphysics without losing their credibility. So I suggest to you that the new truth bearers are coming from the scientific community, not just from metaphysics. And they're bringing forward what ancient societies have always known. You're going to hear from a remarkable man tomorrow, Clifford Mahudi, who walks in two worlds because he has a master's degree in engineering and he is also a Zuni elder. And so he has the situation of having the scientific aspect where he can't go into metaphysical things without losing credibility, but he also has the shamanic knowledge. And so that is what Earth-Keeper is about, blending the two. Spirituality has always omitted the scientific, and the scientific has always omitted the spiritual. We're here to merge them. Many of the new light workers, many of the new Earth-Keepers are academics that deny metaphysics, but they are bringing the very information that is required. Edgar Cayce, who I talk about an awful lot, do I not? Yes? Edgar Cayce made the following statement: mankind will learn more about the nature of God from science than from religion. Is that not astounding? This is a man who read the Bible once a year for every year of his life. Amazing. Absolutely amazing information. And so the primary mechanism of the shifting of the earth is the massive pouring of plasma onto the planet. And this is a spark of everything that is happening, both the Earth's transition all the way across and the shift into lesser density. Zuni Elder Clifford Mahudi will be one of these that is going to share this with us, and I think I see him just walking in the room, so was that not perfect timing? There he is. And Richard, yes. Richard C. Hoagland will offer some incredible information as well. We will speak more about the extraterrestrial question, and we just came out of an interview where we were talking that, and wait till you hear what he shares with you tomorrow. And I'm not going to rain on that parade or offer too much of a sneak preview, but you don't want to miss his talk in the morning at 8:30. But we will speak more about the ET question, but first let's review the expansion and changes on the planet, some that are scientifically recognized, other more spiritually. And so we have at Earth-Keeper always defined the ascension as being the graduation of the Earth into a dimensional expansion. We have said for a number of years that humanity are not ascending at 2012, and I think that's obvious. There are so many people that say, what happened? What was the big deal? Well, the Earth shifted. The Earth shifted into 12 dimensions. But we still need to keep our feet on the ground. There are so many people in metaphysics that get lofty and get airy-fairy that they cannot relate to other people. And it is exactly through relating to other people that we influence other people. If we become so lofty and quote-unquote pseudo-spiritual that we cannot deal with people that are dealing with the 3D aspects, then we've missed the point. We are here, as I mentioned last night, to master the University of what? The University of Earth. And the curriculum is duality. And so we have to keep our foot on the ground. If you don't keep your feet in the first 3 dimensions, you certainly can't go up into the higher ones. It's a stepping stone. So the Earth has shifted into a higher dimensional field. Every planet in our solar system has been affected by the solar radiation, especially the Earth. And so there are all sorts of changes that are taking place that cannot be denied. And this is an example of the solar winds and the radiations that are occurring. X-class solar flares that have been occurring almost non-stop for 2 decades, and they're just bombarding and bathing the Earth with all of this incredible energy, and it reaches the Earth immediately. And so what does that mean? What do these solar flares do? They affect all layers of the solar atmosphere. Tens and millions of electrons and protons and heavier ions are accelerated to near the speed of light and hit the Earth. And they've led to all sorts of changes, as noted by Renison, that the Great Magnetic Storm led to massive shutdowns, global positioning systems, GPS systems failed. They gave erroneous readings. BP in the North Sea stopped drilling. Shell Oil stopped drilling. Their equipment stopped working. Compasses failed. Computer systems crashed. Electrical grids shorted out. How many of the Canadians that are here remember the great blackout that took place in Quebec? Do some of you guys remember that? In Ontario as well, and just a huge portion of Canada. And this was caused by the solar storms. And so just incredible things. The Earth's auric field, the magnetosphere, was flattened, was reduced to half of its normal size. All sorts of things are happening, and this has continued to happen. Such that just a couple of years ago, Obama requested additional information and wanted evolutionary leaders like Deepak Chopra, Greg Braden, and others to come up with information on what they think is changing and what this is going to lead to. So we are in now, 2013, a peak solar cycle. Solar cycles are 11 years, taking a few years to rise and fall between the peaks and the troughs of solar activity. The present solar maximum is in 2012, peaking this year, 2013, just in time for the beginning of the 14th back-tune cycle as measured by the Mayan long count calendar, and we have all followed the work of John Major Jenkins, who I want to credit for this information. And so the latest prediction looks like midway 2013, which happens to be us here now, does it not, for the peak activity to come into place. And so this is what Metatron says about it. Earth shift is a requisite of the new Earth. It is the mechanism for clearing that allows for the higher vibration. Global warming would occur even if humanity were a campestral society. Cosmic radiation from solar winds results in the heating of the Earth. The increased spinning of the inner core and the outer core are the source of warming. As the inner core mass expands, the torque ratio prompts the quickening of time, and radiation allows for the requisite expansion. The cosmos is shifting. Physics are expanding. You are discovering that the laws of physics, which you thought were written in stone, are shifting and expanding. That expansion is multidimensionality. You are discovering that thought, divine thought, is the creator of all that is. That you term the unified field is alive. A new generation of your scientists, academics, and researchers are becoming aware that there is an intelligence in the cosmos and changing the order of physics. And so just some of the things that have happened in the 2 years after the harmonic convergence, the massive number of solar flares, the occurrence of the aurora in daylight hours, and the continuance. These are continuing even now. We saw within the last 6 months a massive hurricane, and in the last week an incredible tornado. The super hurricanes, the class 5 tornadoes, the earthquakes. And was there not a 6.1 earthquake in California yesterday? Is that correct? 5.7? 8.2 in Russia. When was that? 8.2. Where did that take place at? Where? Wow. Or on the Pacific side then. Amazing. So things are still happening. And there is a pattern and a geometry to it. Look at this photograph of Hurricane Sandy. Notice the Fibonacci series. It's just absolutely amazing. This is affecting the Earth. And there is evidence that this cosmic radiation is changing human DNA. How many of you know what the Cambrian radiation is? Cambrian radiation was a period that occurred about 570 million years ago, in which all biological life that we now recognize suddenly appeared. Before that, there was none. Before that, there were one-celled animals and invertebrates. And suddenly, in this one relatively young period of 507 million years ago, all of this life occurred. All of the life that we consider mammals, all the life that we now recognize, suddenly appeared on the Earth. Although the Earth is 4.6 billion with a B years old, only 570 million years ago did our form of life suddenly appear. And it appeared into a phase that many theorists believe was a time of massive solar radiation. David Wilcott has spoken, and I want to credit him, about the work of Dr. Luc Montagnier, a Nobel Prize winner. And this information was all over the internet. It was in Newsweek on the cover. And he was the one that had won the Nobel Prize for his work on AIDS, but he took 2 test tubes. And in one of these test tubes, he put human DNA. In the other one, he put distilled pure water. And he put the 2 test tubes in a test situation. He put coherent light through them in a theta vibration. He put coherent light through both of them, which is a laser beam, at a theta vibration. And you know what happened? The DNA in one of the test tubes transmigrated, it appeared in the one that was pure distilled water. And this is documented. This is a fact. This happened. He tried to repeat the test without either the coherent light or the theta vibration, and it did not repeat itself. And so the conclusion that I have drawn is that there is a divine energy in the consciousness of the unified field. There is a consciousness in the universe. And when that DNA was activated by a coherent light and by the theta vibration, it became multidimensional, and it occurred spontaneously in the medium of water in which it could grow. And so the conclusion that I take from this is that as we become more multi-dimensional beings, as we learn how to operate in the other bandwidth of theta waves, that we are far more capable of scripting our destiny, of creating our world. And so, just as 570 million years ago, the Cambrian radiation brought about vast change to the Earth, I suggest to you that in 2013, the Aquarian shift, the Aquarian radiation is doing the same thing, and you are a part of it. You are here for this reason. How many times have you heard that you waited in line to be here now? What I suggest to you is that 2012 was not the end, that 2012 was not the climax, that 2013 is when the real work begins. 2013 is how we move forward and begin creating the new earth. This is an important year, and this is an important time. And all of you have life experience. And so that ties into what I was speaking about last night too, is you all have a purpose. You're all the wayshowers. You are all the pioneers. You came here to be here at this time, and now is when the work really starts. We have to create the new earth. The mistake that was made in Atlantis, the mistake that was made in parts of Egypt, is that we did not know how to deal with aggression. We did not know how to deal with violence. I suggest to you, as I mentioned last night, you don't end war by hating war, you end war by loving peace. You don't end violence by hating violence, you end violence by loving peace, but that does not mean that you apologize when someone steps on your foot. You have to take creative, aggressive action in the manner revealed by Mahatma Gandhi. You don't just stand back and let someone take over your will. I suggest that we aggressively meditate together in theta vibration to visualize world peace and harmony and love, and that takes work and that takes effort. And that is aggressive action. And I'll tell you something, that the beauty of a flower bursting its way through the soil and the earth takes far more aggression on the part of the flower than you can imagine. And that creating peace is our highest good, is our highest energy goal, and that it will take effort. It's not going to happen by us putting our heads in the sand. There's a lot of changes that need to take place in the world, are there not? Can you think of some of the changes that we would like to have starting in our own country? You don't need to verbalize them out, but can you see situations that, that may need to be changed? And without going political, is our system really representing us? Is it? Is it perhaps a situation where, as Graham Hancock had the courage to speak about a war on consciousness, are there perhaps groups in the corporate world that want to hold people into a certain pocket? Do maybe some of those own the Congress of the United States through a legally corrupt system called lobbying? Perhaps. And so the way that we will change the earth is through meditating together in a remarkable way. And I'm going to tell you how some of these things work. Just very briefly, you can see the Cambrian change timeline here, in which a time of solar activity came and changed things. And so one of the things that I'm suggesting, and that we'll go back and talk about just a little bit, is that humanity is changing too. According to academic theory, silicon is the only viable element that can support human biology. Who was the first to come up with that? Someone want to offer that? How about Dr. Carl Sagan? You know who he is? He wrote the movie or the book Cosmos that you've seen on television, but he was one of the most remarkable astrophysicists of our time. An absolute genius. He used to be on talk television a lot. He was on Johnny Carson. He was a favorite guest, and he had a very distinctive way of speaking. But he was a genius. He was an absolute brilliant man. And one time, you know, you think of academics as not necessarily having a great sense of humor, but one time he was on the Dick Cavett show. Do you remember the Dick Cavett show? Or am I showing my age? And he walked out, and Dick Cavett, who had an incredible wit, said to Carl Sagan something along the lines of, well, I'm really concerned about the rings around Saturn. He said, can you tell us a little bit about that, Dr. Sagan? Because there was some issue about the rings of Saturn. And Sagan's reply to Cavett was, well, I'm not really concerned about the clouds around Saturn, the rings around Saturn. He said, but I'm very worried about the gaseous clouds around Uranus. And that was pretty quick, and that was Carl Sagan. And so Carl Sagan was a man of incredible brilliance and credibility, and he was the one that suggested that the most likely alternative to biochemical system of a biochemical system to support human biology is the silicon atom. And since silicon has many chemical properties similar to carbon, it is in the same periodic table group as the carbon group, it can create molecules that are sufficiently large to carry biological information. And that is a direct quote from Carl Sagan, because there is a shift that's going to take place. We are going to shift, and this goes into the metaphysics, according to Metatron, into silicon beings as we once were, because they have 4 valences just as carbon does. The reason we are considered carbon life is because there is carbon in almost every complex molecule system in our physical bodies. The only viable shift can be silicon, and what is silicon dioxide? Quartz. We are becoming crystals, and it will take a number of years for that to happen. But I believe that there was a time on the earth millennia ago, many millennia, many epochs ago, in which we were crystal beings. And this is the process that we're beginning to see in 2013 that this can happen again. Does that make sense? Is it not important to see how we need to bring in the science to the metaphysics? And is it not amazing how now so many academics are coming out with scientific information that feeds into what metaphysicians have believed for a number of years? It is absolutely encouraging to me. And so, as I mentioned, the Cambrian explosion was a relatively rapid appearance between 530 and 570 million years ago that brought almost all forms of life that we know today into place. And we are in the crystal shift now, and I believe that it is happening, and this is why. If you look at this photograph, you see highly charged plasma now starting to show up on NASA photographs that are circulating the Earth. Look at this one. This is another NASA photograph that shows jet streams of plasma moving all across the Earth. Now, what is interesting about that plasma is that it is almost entirely anionic in charge. Anionic means it carries the negative charge. And since all of this started happening, then unusual light phenomena began to occur over the last few years. Light sprites started occurring in certain regions of Colorado. This is one that was photographed by an airplane. Look at this. And these were happening at around 13,000 feet. And what's even more interesting, we had phenomena of what is called jellyfish. The new light phenomena that has been occurring more and more in the past 2 decades. Duke University has begun a funded study of jellyfish and plasmic photonic life. Inorganic life is what I suggest some of these may be. Now, the academic community are simply exploring interesting life phenomena. But many religious texts have always said that there are 3 forms of life. Clay, representing human. Air, which represented the angelic or light, the angelic beings, and fire, representing perhaps a photonic electric form of life. The Quran speaks about that. The Bible speaks on those terms. So these light phenomena, interestingly, really only began occurring after the harmonic convergence, after the solar winds really began at peak, after 1989. And they're taking on studies. And then one of the canaries, one of the interesting things about crop circles, suddenly there's a crop circle a few years ago of an interesting jellyfish. You see that?
Wilhelm Reich predicted that they were creatures of that sort in the end.
Fantastic, fantastic. And so researchers at Duke University have captured the best images ever produced of sprites, mysterious flashes of lights resembling a giant undulating jellyfish. The researchers said their findings could lead to a better understanding of the physics and chemistry of the newly discovered, still unexplained lightning phenomena. Duke University started making these studies after marking gamma ray flashes in 1989. So what I suggest is perhaps the plasma is giving us the tools to work in a different bandwidth. Perhaps it is opening our pineal gland, in which we're becoming aware now that there are more dimensions, more levels of conscious reception available to us on the earth because of these anionic charges. The angelic realm is antimatter. Perhaps our chakras are particle accelerators, just like the one in CERN, Switzerland. Would that bring the science together? What if angels exist in antimatter? What if when we go to sleep tonight, we go into a realm of antimatter? It wouldn't change anything, but it would give a scientific explanation that makes sense, does it not? Is that stimulating to think about? Does that make sense? Maybe, just as the ancient Chinese have said that the universe is a snake eating its own tail, ties in what the ancient Egyptians said about the torus, a circle that envelops itself and turns inside out. Maybe all time joins together at the Planck number of 10 to the negative 43 power in that section between matter and antimatter. Dr. J. Alfred suggests that orbs that only began coming up a few years ago are a form of intelligent, high-frequency intelligence existing in parallel dimensional fields that are only now becoming available. And he doesn't say this, I say this through Metatron, that it is the solar winds that are bringing the anionic charge that allows us to see that. Now, why do I say that? There is a study by Dr. Bernice Barlow, who is an educator from California, and she wrote a book called Sacred Sites of the West. How many have read that book or heard of it? Great book. You should get Sacred Sites of the West. There is a 3-paragraph section in that book that I read a few years ago, and it stuck with me. And she said that the University of California had taken ionic generators and shifted the normal background of anions to cations, negative to positive. Normally, it is 5 to 3, negative to positive. They shifted it 6 to 1, positive to 6 to 1, negative to positive. And when that happened, through ionic generators, people started having out-of-body experiences. They started hallucinating. They started seeing things that weren't there. By shifting the anionic ratio, 6 to 1, people started hallucinating. So the university then concluded that when people have out-of-body experiences, as many of these people had, and saw Devics, fairies, UFOs, it was just a hallucination of the mind because of the anionic shift. My theory with those same databases is that they had, and the reason she tied this in is that she said certain places on the earth, certain power nodes, sacred sites on the earth, particularly the ones that many Native Americans go to for vision quest, already had this 6 to 1 ratio because of mineralogy. And the Native Americans, who were a campestral society that worked very close to Earth, understood on some intuitive level that when they went to these areas and to have visions, the visions happened more quickly. The veils were thin. And so because of the 6 to 1 ratio, they could vision and travel in what Dr. Miguel Ruiz of the 4 agreements says is the Nagual and the tonal worlds, that this omniverse, this omni-earth has always been here, but we have limited our ability to tune into the beta consciousness that Graham talks about and not the other receptions. And so it is the solar storms that are coming in and perhaps allowing us now, because the 6 to 1 ratio opens the pineal. The New Earth 2013 is easier for us to be aware of multidimensionality because the solar winds have changed the anionic ratio, particularly in certain points. That is why pilots are now seeing jellyfish, light phenomena. That is why orbs are starting to appear, and orbs are a very, very interesting phenomenon. Now let me read you this. And this was published in the New York Journal of Physics. An international scientific team has discovered that under the right conditions, particles of charged plasma can become organized into helical structures which can interact with each other in ways that are usually associated with organic, intelligent life. Under the right conditions, particles of inorganic subatomic material, plasma, organize themselves in the same way as intelligent life. Using a computer model of molecular dynamics, 2 doctors of the Russian Academy of Science shows that particles of plasma can undergo self-organization as electrical charges become separated and the plasma becomes polarized in coherent light. Coherent light. Does that sound familiar? In the other study, that DNA could jump when coherent theta appeared? Is it perhaps that when we get into a theta state, we can make magic happen too? You have things like Vogel crystals that Marcel Vogel say create coherent light, and he was able to use them in documented tests to heal people. To code water with crystal patterns that he said is rejuvenating. Amazing. There are a lot of things happening. According to a team headed by French Nobel Prize winner Dr. Luc Montagnier, 2 test tubes, one of which contained a tiny piece of DNA, the other pure sterilized distilled water, were placed in sealed tubes side by side. Both were surrounded by an electromagnetic field in the theta of 7 hertz, and in the test, a fragment of the DNA appeared to teleport, spontaneously form in the tube of the distilled. And here's another really exciting piece of information. Dr. Gariev of the Russian Science Academy directed a laser beam of coherent light through a developing salamander embryo and then redirected it into the developing embryo of a frog, inside a frog. When he ran the light beam first through the salamander, then the frog had salamander babies. The coherent light carried the DNA of the salamander directly into the frog. Is that fascinating? My point, coherent light, coherent energy fields, and that the anionic charges that are coming from the cosmic radiation of the Aquarian shift are starting to become standing pools in certain places. Southern part of South America, in the area that we're in now, in the area of Moscow, in the area just off the tip of Perth, Australia, standing pools are starting to accumulate. I suggest these anionic charges are going to get bigger and bigger and bigger, and they are going to allow us to have the pineal open just in the way that Dr. Bernice Barlow suggested is happening with the ionic generators, and that we will be able to open these receptors and see other realities that have been suppressed from us before. Realities that vision-questing people were able to see when they went to other places that had these shifts. Does that make sense? And so orbs are starting to appear. This is a photograph taken at the 12-12-12 in Arkansas by Chris DeCento. This is a photograph taken by Wendy Zelia in Merlin's Cave with a group that we went with. Is that amazing? This is in the King's Chamber last year. And there are some people you'll recognize here. This is our IT guy, Bruce. That's me. And we had several of these photographs that were taken inside the King's Chamber. Inside the King's Chamber. Remarkable. What else was remarkable is we got 85 people inside the King's Chamber. And so perhaps what we're seeing is because we took all the oxygen out of the room. And that was actually a concern for the monitors there, that we were going to breathe up all the oxygen and get carbon poisoning. But that's an actual photograph, and it's unretouched in any way. And some of these orbs are quite remarkable, like that one and that one. And these orbs are showing up everywhere. And so what I suggest that these are living thought forms in a way that sometimes we ourselves create. How many of you get inspired at certain times, whether through music, through writing, through thought? I think that when you get inspired, you automatically open the pineal, and the pineal projects some of these. I think this is a photograph that a lady named Paula Wirtz took of me in Holland last year. This is in Amsterdam, and I'm teaching a class about sacred sites, and she got this remarkable photograph. And so I suggest that when we're opening, that when we're teaching, that when we are inspired, these things come because our pineal opens, and that we project into other dimensions, and so we pull in what we call downloads. Does that make sense? So I'm going to try to get us back on time, and so I'm suggesting that there are a lot of things happening now, and that the Aquarian shift, the time of the new earth, is because the anionic ratio is shifting. And so now we are in a time that has 12 dimensions. How do we know there's more dimensions available? New light phenomena are occurring. Perhaps jellyfish and light sprites and light elves are photonic forms of life. Perhaps orbs are a form of inorganic living energy. Perhaps we are seeing more evidence than we believe possible, or that we recognize in mass that the 12 dimensions is there. I suggest to you that the ascension of 2012 was the ascension of the earth, that we are now in 12 dimensions, and that the 2013 is the time to create, because when we open the pineal gland, and the 6-to-1 ratio helps do it, we have, through coherent theta thought in unison, the ability to co-create the earth. I suggest to you that the new role that each of you carry now, the new responsibility, the reason you're here now is to help create the new earth. Are there things that we'd like to change on the earth? Are there things that we would like to change in our own country? You can think of a few things. Do we feel trapped sometimes by situations where we feel like we can't make these changes? I suggest to you, as was discovered by the RAND think tank, one of the most respected organizations in the world, that when they organize people en masse to meditate toward less crime and highest good, the crime rates in 7 major cities during the time that they were meditating, and they only had 700 people doing it, dropped, and this is a fact. And the RAND Corporation, the RAND think tank, is a credible organization, a left-wing organization, not left-wing, left-brained. And they are a non-metaphysical group. They are legitimate business, so to speak. And they found in their studies that 700 people meditating together lowered the crime rate in 7 major cities across the United States. So what can happen if we have 450 people here meditate toward world peace? And what happens if that 450, if we organize certain times, and then suddenly we've got 144,000 people meditating 1 hour a week for world peace? What's going to happen? What's going to happen when you have 144 million people meditating aggressively for world peace? Maybe we'll make the changes that we need to make. And maybe that's why we are here. And maybe that's what we need to do. Maybe that's what's next. Thank you.